since he crossed the personal line, he's not gonna have my respect. He's not gonna have my team's respect. All I'm gonna need is 2 minutes in the octagon with you. Then I'm gonna put you to sleep in front of your whole family, your country, in front of everyone. My name is Ilia Topuria. I'm a professional athlete. That I'm the best. I'm the best fighter.
Ilia Topuria has officially announced his retirement from the UFC. Not after spending years fighting inside the octagon. Not after injuries finally caught up with him or his body gave out. He made this shocking decision after suffering just one defeat, the very first loss of his professional career. The way everything unfolded, the stage where it happened, the opponent standing across from him, and the words Topuria shared afterward created the kind of story that only combat sports can produce. It feels almost impossible to believe because it is a kind of ending no one could have written, no matter how creative they tried to be. Only 18 months ago, Ilia Topuria looked completely unstoppable. He was undefeated, holding 2 championship belts, and dominating every one place in front of him. He had already defeated Alexander Volkanovski twice before moving up in weight and completely dismantling Max Holloway to capture another title. At that point, he was no longer viewed as just another champion. Fans, analysts, and former fighters were already placing him among the greatest talents the sport had ever seen. Many believed he belonged in conversations reserved for the most legendary names in MMA history. His confidence before this fight reflected exactly how untouchable.
Go for the win, and I think that was the choice he had to make because it was going to continue to get worse. I beat his ass in the first round. Like, it might have been close on the scorecards. I absolutely took the first round, but the amount of damage that I inflicted in the first round set up the rest of the fight.
Untouchable he believed he had become before fight night even arrived. Topuria made headlines by building a casket for his opponent. He carefully placed a white rose on top of it as a symbol of what he believed would happen inside the cage. At the final press conference, held on the famous steps of the Lincoln Memorial, he shoved Justin Gaethje in front of cameras from around the world and confidently declared that the ending had already been written. But reality delivered a completely different script. He was knocked unconscious in front of President Donald Trump, and only 3 days later, at just 28 years old, he announced his retirement with a professional record containing only 1 defeat. Just like that, one of the most confident fighters in MMA disappeared from the sport. This is a complete story of how the man who believed he controlled his own destiny unknowingly created the ending to his own journey, and what he said after everything came to an end. In back-to-back fights before moving to lightweight, where he destroyed Max Holloway to capture another championship. Even after returning to featherweight, he still held both titles. He was performing at such an extraordinary level that many respected analysts struggled to find words big enough to describe what they were witnessing. Justin Gaethje entered the fight as the mandatory challenger. He was a former interim lightweight champion and a veteran who had already shared the octagon with legends such as Khabib Nurmagomedov, Tony Ferguson, Charles Oliveira, and Dustin Poirier. He had finished elite fighters and had also been tested by the very best competitors in the world. Despite all of that experience, almost nobody believed he had a realistic chance of winning this fight. The betting odds clearly reflected that opinion. The discussion surrounding the matchup reflected the same belief. Even casual fans were not asking whether Topuria would win. They were only debating how quickly he would finish Gaethje. That overwhelming expectation created the perfect background for everything that followed, including the ugly build-up before the opening bell. Gaethje soon took things much further by making the rivalry personal. He publicly described Topuria as nothing more than a gimmick, not a true fighter, not a real champion, just a performance created for cameras instead of someone built through years of fighting inside the cage. Then, without anyone bringing it up, Gaethje also targeted Topuria's divorce. Standing in front of reporters and television cameras, he said, "I understand why anybody would leave him." That single statement completely changed the tone of the rivalry. What had started as ordinary trash talk suddenly crossed into something much more serious and emotionally charged. Topuria chose not to answer with words. Instead, he responded with one of the most dramatic promotional stunts seen in recent UFC history. He revealed the casket prepared for Gaethje and gently placed a white rose on top of it, creating the image of a funeral before the fight had even taken place. The message could not have been clearer. In Topuria's mind, This was never just another championship fight. It was already over, and he believed he would be the man delivering the final goodbye. The tension finally exploded during the last pre-fight press conference, which took place on the famous steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Even the location itself suggested that everyone involved wanted this event to feel historic. What nobody expected was the chaos that followed. During the final face-off, Topuria suddenly shoved Gaethje. It was not a light push. It was strong enough that Dana White's disappointed reaction was immediately captured on camera. After investing so much time and money into organizing a major promotional event at one of America's most recognizable landmarks, the UFC president watched his champion physically confront his opponent in front of the entire world. Gaethje deserves credit for refusing to respond physically, but he certainly did not stay silent. Looking over the Lincoln Memorial and the National Mall behind them, he said, "Look at this beautiful view, and you want to act like an animal." He then called Topuria an emotional little animal, making the exchange even more personal. Later, Topuria explained why he decided to shove his opponent. According to him, he had already warned Gaethje not to move any closer, and when Gaethje challenged him to throw a punch, he made a calculated decision. A punch could have caused the Athletic Commission to remove Gaethje from the fight, while a shove would not, so he chose to push him instead. Whether fans see that as controlled restraint or deliberate provocation depends entirely on which fighter they supported. Just when it seemed the drama could not become any bigger, heavyweight fighter Josh Hokett, who was not even competing in the same weight class, decided to join the conversation, standing beside Topuria. He joked that Topuria was so short he could not even see himself in the bathroom mirror. The crowd immediately burst into laughter. Topuria, however, clearly was not amused. The crowd loved the joke, but Ilia Topuria clearly did not. By the time fight night finally arrived, he had spent weeks telling everyone that Justin Gaethje's career was already over. He had a custom casket built, placed flowers on top of it, shoved his opponent at one of America's most famous landmarks, and absorbed every insult, every personal attack, and every joke about his height. Instead of ignoring those comments, he turned all of that emotion into complete confidence that Saturday night would end with Gaethje's career lying in ruins. He had never felt more certain about the outcome of a fight than he did walking into this one. The opening round, however, turned out to be deceptive in the worst possible way for Topuria. He started the fight moving smoothly around the cage, controlling the distance, looking relaxed, and carrying himself exactly like a champion who believed the result had already been decided before the first punch was thrown. Gaethje remained patient from the opening bell. He stayed cautious, tested the range, and refused to rush into dangerous exchanges too early. The first few minutes clearly showed the type of fight Topuria wanted. He applied steady pressure, landed sharp counters, and displayed the calculated aggression that had already broken some of the best fighters in the world. For long stretches of that first round, everything appeared to be working perfectly. Topuria landed clean shots, looked incredibly fast, appeared dangerous every time he attacked, and resembled exactly the dominant champion everyone expected to see. Then came the moment that completely changed the direction of the fight. Halfway through the second round, Gaethje connected with a perfectly timed right hand that snapped Topuria's head backward. It was not a knockout punch, and it did not immediately stop the fight, but it marked the first time all evening that Topuria looked genuinely affected by a strike. More importantly, it revealed something to Gaethje that nobody else inside the arena had fully realized yet. For the first time in a championship fight, Topuria looked vulnerable. He was easier to hit than he had ever been during any of his previous title defenses. Gaethje built his reputation by surviving punishment and continuing to move forward no matter what happened. Once he recognized that opening, he refused to let it go to waste. The damage in the fight began building quietly before suddenly becoming impossible to ignore. Topuria continued landing his own shots, but Gaethje answered with powerful strikes of his own. Unlike many of Topuria's previous opponents, Gaethje refused to break under the pressure. He stayed calm, continued making adjustments, and patiently waited for the exact pattern he needed to exploit. That opportunity finally arrived late in the second round. Topuria committed fully to one of the aggressive combinations that had finished so many opponents throughout his career. Gaethje had been waiting for exactly that moment. He stepped forward behind a perfectly straight right hand that landed directly on Topuria's chin. The impact was devastating. Topuria did not simply lose his balance or stumble backward. He crashed to the canvas. The referee watched closely for only a few seconds before stepping in and waving the fight off. There was no dramatic recovery, no desperate attempt to crawl toward the fence, and no miracle comeback. Ilia Topuria, the undefeated 17-0 featherweight and lightweight champion of the world, lay unconscious on the canvas in front of the President of the United States and thousands of fans who had arrived expecting to witness another dominant victory. Instead, they watched Justin Gaethje in one of the most impressive championship runs the UFC had seen in recent years. What happened next shocked people almost as much as the knockout itself. Eventually, every fighter experiences defeat, but what followed this loss felt far more permanent. 3 days after the fight, Topuria finally broke his silence. He did not issue a carefully written press release through his management team. He did not ask someone else to speak on his behalf. Instead, he went directly to his own social media platform, addressed the supporters personally, and shared exactly what was on his mind. He said, "I came into this sport to prove something. I've proved it, and I am not willing to give the sport the version of me that chases ghosts." Those words stunned the MMA community. He was not announcing plans for a rematch. He was not promising revenge or demanding immediate redemption. Instead, at only 28 years old, Topuria announced that he was retiring from the UFC after suffering the first professional loss of his career. His record now stood at 17 wins and just 1 defeat, and that defeat had happened on the biggest stage imaginable in the largest MMA organization in the world. The entire MMA community paused because this was not how stories like this were supposed to end. The usual script in combat sports is simple. An undefeated champion eventually loses, faces public criticism, rebuilds mentally and physically, then returns stronger than before. Fans expect that story. Promoters expect that story. Television networks expect that story. Even a fighter's own pride usually demands that story. Topuria completely rejected that path. What made his announcement even more powerful than all the confidence he displayed before the fight was what he chose not to say. He never blamed Gaethje for anything. He never demanded another fight. He never claimed the result was unfair. He never searched for excuses or tried to explain away the knockout. Instead, he calmly explained that the version of himself who needed a fight was a version that still had something left to prove. According to his own words, that version of Ilia Topuria no longer existed. That statement can be viewed in 2 completely different ways. It may be one of the most honest and self-aware things any fighter has ever said immediately after suffering a knockout defeat. Or it may simply reflect the raw emotion and overwhelming disappointment of one of the most painful nights of his entire career. Ilia Topuria has officially announced his retirement from the UFC. Not after spending years fighting inside the octagon. Not after injuries finally caught up with him or his body gave out. He made this shocking decision after suffering just 1 defeat, the very first loss of his professional career. The way everything unfolded, the stage where it happened, the opponent standing across from him, and the words Topuria shared afterward created the kind of story that only combat sports can produce. It feels almost impossible to believe because it is a kind of ending no one could have written, no matter how creative they tried to be. Only 18 months ago, Ilia Topuria looked completely unstoppable. He was undefeated, holding 2 championship belts, and dominating every one place in front of him. He had already defeated Alexander Volkanovski twice before moving up in weight and completely dismantling Max Holloway to capture another title. At that point, he was no longer viewed as just another champion. Fans, analysts, and former fighters were already placing him among the greatest talents the sport had ever seen. Many believed he belonged in conversations reserved for the most legendary names in MMA history. His confidence before this fight reflected exactly how untouchable